It's noon in Constantinople. The year is 532 AD. The merciless sun bakes the sand at the center of the arena. 50,000 pairs of eyes watch a single point. Her. Let's call her Helena. 23 years old. A woman of patrician class whose name appears in the fragmentary chronicles of Byzantine historian John Malalas. Yesterday, she was part of the elite. Today, she kneels at the center of the Hippodrome, shackled in iron, stripped of dignity, waiting for a sentence that was never written in any official legal code. We think of prison as a modern invention. Concrete cells, cameras, numbers instead of names. Contemporary methods of control. But the system for breaking human beings was perfected centuries ago. Before we built walls topped with razor wire, we used open space to transform a person into an example. Welcome to Prison Diaries. Today, we travel back to a time when prison had no ceiling and sentences were carried out to the applause of crowds. The Hippodrome of Constantinople was officially a place of entertainment. In reality, it served the same function as today's Supermax facilities. It was a massive cage where the emperor, like a prison warden, observed everyone from his imperial box. The arena stretched nearly 450 meters long and 120 meters wide, larger than 4 football fields, built by Emperor Septimius Severus around 203 AD and expanded by Constantine the Great when he established Constantinople as the new capital of the Roman Empire in 330 AD. But this wasn't just a sports venue. Byzantine historian Procopius, writing in the 6th century, described the Hippodrome as a theater of state power, a place where political enemies disappeared, where dissidents were executed, where the boundary between entertainment and terror dissolved into the roar of the crowd. The underground passages beneath the arena, the carceres, functioned exactly like modern prison corridors. Dark, damp tunnels where prisoners waited in cells before being brought into the light, where their final moments of anonymity ended and their transformation into public spectacle began. The blues and the greens weren't ordinary sports fans. These were organized criminal factions that operated like modern prison gangs. They controlled territories within the city, had their own leaders, their own brutal codes of conduct. If you were born into a blue family, you died blue. Loyalty was currency, exactly like today's prison commissary, where safety is what you trade for survival. These factions didn't just cheer for chariot teams. They engaged in street warfare, political manipulation, and systematic violence. The emperor relied on them to maintain control, just as modern prison administrators rely on inmate hierarchies to manage populations they cannot fully control through official means alone. In January 532 AD, this system exploded. The Nika riots began when Emperor Justinian ordered the execution of members from both the blue and green factions, following a particularly violent chariot race. The factions, for once, united against imperial authority. What followed was 6 days of chaos that nearly destroyed Constantinople. According to Procopius in his Wars of Justinian, the rioters burned the Senate House, the Church of Hagia Sophia, and large sections of the city. Justinian prepared to flee. His wife, Empress Theodora, famously declared that she would rather die an empress than live as a fugitive. Justinian's general, Belisarius, trapped the rioters in the Hippodrome. What happened next was documented by both Procopius and John Malalas. Imperial troops entered the arena and massacred everyone inside. The death toll, according to these chronicles, reached approximately 30,000 people. 30,000. The Hippodrome became a killing floor, its sand soaked with so much blood that witnesses reported it pooling in the lower sections of the arena. This wasn't execution. This was systematic elimination of a population deemed too dangerous to control through normal means. Sound familiar? Our first story takes place in the aftermath of these riots. Helena was arrested not for what she did, but for who she was. Malalas's fragmentary chronicle mentions a woman of high birth, affiliated with the Green faction through family ties, who was brought to the Hippodrome for public punishment. The details are sparse, but the procedure was documented in multiple Byzantine sources. She was taken to the dungeons beneath the arena. These underground chambers, discovered by archaeologists in the 20th century, reveal a sophisticated prison system. Small cells barely large enough to stand in. No light except what filtered through grates in the ceiling. The smell of human waste mixed with fear. Exactly like modern solitary confinement, these cells were designed to break the spirit before the body faced its final test. The procedure was identical to modern prison intake. According to the legal codes compiled under Justinian, known as the Corpus Juris Civilis, prisoners designated for public execution underwent a ritual of dehumanization. Their heads were shaved, their clothes were taken, their names were replaced with descriptions: the traitor, the blasphemer, the enemy of the state. Instead of a person, they became an object, a teaching tool. Guards led Helena through the tunnels. She could hear the roar of the crowd above, a sound that must have felt like the ocean preparing to swallow her. Then, the heavy wooden doors opened, and she was pushed onto the sand. When they brought her onto the arena floor, it wasn't about quick death. Death would have been mercy. This was about the spectacle of fear. 50,000 people watched as she was chained to a wooden post at the center of the Hippodrome. The chains were long enough to allow movement, but not escape. Behind her, guards opened a heavy metal gate. They released a bull, not to kill her quickly, but to terrorize her slowly. This was psychological torture in its purest form. Helena, chained but not immobile, could feel the vibration of the sand under the beast's hooves, could hear its breathing, but she couldn't turn around, couldn't run, couldn't do anything except wait. In prison, the worst punishment is rarely physical pain. It's the anticipation of pain, that moment when your own imagination becomes your greatest torturer. Psychologists call this anticipatory anxiety. Studies of death row inmates show that the waiting causes more psychological damage than the execution itself. The Byzantine system understood this 6 centuries before modern psychology documented it. They wanted Helena to break, to beg in front of the crowd, to prove that imperial power could reduce anyone to nothing, regardless of birth or status. The bull charged. Chronicles don't detail what happened next, only that she survived that day. But the woman who entered the arena died, nonetheless. The system achieved its goal. It erased her. Common Byzantine punishment involved mutilation, blinding, cutting off the nose, severing tendons. The legal code specified these penalties for various crimes. The purpose wasn't just punishment, but permanent marking. Emperor Leo III's legal reforms in the 8th century actually promoted mutilation as a humane alternative to execution, believing it allowed criminals to repent while ensuring they could never again function normally in society. A blinded man couldn't plot rebellion. A woman with a severed nose couldn't hide her shame. These mutilations were conducted publicly, often in the Hippodrome, with medical practitioners ensuring the victim survived to live as a warning to others. Is this really so different from what we do today? When the modern system releases a prisoner after years of isolation, branded with a felony record that closes every door, traumatized by experiences we refuse to acknowledge, unemployable and often homeless, haven't we simply modernized mutilation? We don't cut off noses anymore. We cut off futures. We don't blind eyes. We blind opportunities. The mechanism remains the same. The vocabulary has changed. Let me tell you about our second case. In the year 548 AD, during the reign of Justinian, a series of public executions took place that Byzantine historian Evagrius Scholasticus documented in his Ecclesiastical History. Among those executed was a charioteer named Marcus, a member of the Blue faction, who had killed a rival from the Greens during a street fight. Marcus wasn't just executed. He was made into a lesson about what happens when the prison gangs, these factions, disrupted imperial order too visibly. Marcus was held in the underground cells for 3 weeks before his execution. This waiting period was standard practice, documented in imperial legal codes. The purpose was twofold: allow time for appeals that rarely succeeded, and allow time for the prisoner's mental state to deteriorate. Guards would inform prisoners daily of the crowd size expected for their execution, would describe in detail the method that awaited them, would sometimes bring them to the tunnel entrance, let them hear the roar of the crowd, then take them back to their cell, explaining that the emperor had delayed their death by 1 more day. This psychological torture was policy, not cruelty. It was designed to ensure that by the time the prisoner reached the arena, resistance had been replaced by submission. When Marcus finally entered the Hippodrome, he was brought before the imperial box. Emperor Justinian sat in elevated glory, flanked by guards and officials. The charges were read aloud: not just murder, but disturbing the peace, threatening imperial order, acting as an enemy of civilization itself. Every crime was amplified through rhetoric until Marcus wasn't a charioteer who'd killed in a street fight. He was a monster who'd attacked the very foundations of society. Modern prosecutors use identical language. They transform individual acts into existential threats. They ensure that by the time sentence is pronounced, the defendant has been dehumanized sufficiently that whatever happens next seems not just legal, but necessary. Marcus was executed by being torn apart by horses. Each limb was tied to a different horse, which were then driven in opposite directions. This method, documented in multiple Byzantine sources, was reserved for the most serious crimes. It wasn't quick. Evagrius notes that it took several attempts, the ropes breaking multiple times, prolonging the agony while the crowd watched. Some cheered, some looked away. Most simply watched with the numb fascination that comes from seeing something forbidden, something that in private would horrify, but in public becomes acceptable because everyone else is watching too. We tell ourselves we've evolved beyond such barbarism. But have we? We don't tear bodies apart with horses anymore. We use lethal injection, which sounds clinical and humane until you read the documented cases of executions gone wrong. The 2014 execution of Clayton Lockett in Oklahoma took 43 minutes. Witnesses reported him writhing, speaking, trying to rise from the gurney. The 2022 execution of Joe James in Alabama took over 3 hours to complete. The methods change, the spectacle continues, and society watches, if not in person, then through media coverage, with the same mix of fascination and revulsion that filled the Hippodrome 15 centuries ago. Our third story involves a woman who represents a category of prisoner that existed in both ancient and modern systems: the foreign captive with no legal standing. In 626 AD, Constantinople faced siege by the Avars and Persians. When the siege was finally broken, prisoners of war were brought to the Hippodrome. Among them, according to the chronicles of Patriarch Nikephoros, were women captured during raids on Byzantine territory. These women had no citizenship, no legal representation, no voice in any proceeding that determined their fate. One of these women, described only as a Persian captive of notable beauty, was not executed, but rather sold into slavery within the Hippodrome itself. The arena had an active slave market that operated between spectacles. Human beings were auctioned like livestock, their value determined by age, appearance, and perceived utility. This woman was purchased by a wealthy merchant and disappeared into domestic servitude. Her name was never recorded. Her fate beyond the sale was never documented. She exists in history only as a transaction, a line item in the empire's economy of human flesh. This parallels exactly what happens in modern immigration detention. Women arrested at borders, held in facilities that function as prisons, despite different names, facing deportation to countries where they may be killed. Their legal status is ambiguous. Their voices are unheard. Their suffering is administrative, processed through paperwork that transforms human tragedy into bureaucratic procedure. Like the Persian woman in 626 AD, they exist in systems designed to make them invisible, to process them efficiently, to ensure that their elimination from society, whether through deportation or death, happens with minimal disruption to those who benefit from the system's existence. The Hippodrome operated under a principle that sounds familiar to anyone who understands modern corrections. The spectacle of punishment serves multiple purposes simultaneously. It eliminates the punished. It terrifies potential future offenders. It entertains the masses. And most importantly, it demonstrates power. The emperor in his box wasn't just watching executions. He was displaying his authority to eliminate anyone, anywhere, for any reason that served imperial interests. Byzantine legal scholar John Leidus wrote in the 6th century that public punishment was the foundation of social order, that without the visible demonstration of consequences, civilization would collapse into chaos. Modern criminologists make similar arguments about deterrence, about the necessity of harsh sentences, about the importance of making examples. The vocabulary has changed from Greek to English. The underlying philosophy remains identical. The ruins of the Hippodrome stand today in Istanbul. Tourists take photos there, unaware of the blood soaked into the earth beneath their feet. The arena is gone, replaced by a public park. But the mechanisms perfected there persist in every prison yard, every execution chamber, every system designed to break human beings in ways that serve state power. We've replaced stone benches with metal bunks, the arena with monitored recreation yards, the emperor's box with control rooms filled with screens. But the architecture of control, the psychology of public punishment, the transformation of human beings into examples and warnings continues unchanged. The Hippodrome taught us that you don't need walls to create a prison. You need power, spectacle, and a population willing to watch suffering without intervening. Every time we watch news coverage of criminals being perp-walked in handcuffs, we're sitting in the Hippodrome. Every time we accept that certain humans deserve whatever happens to them because they broke rules, we're cheering in the stands. Every time we allow systems to operate in our name, funded by our taxes, carrying out violence, we've agreed not to examine too closely. We become the 50,000 pairs of eyes that watched Helena on that sand. History judges civilizations not by their monuments, but by how they treat the powerless. The Hippodrome of Constantinople was one of the great architectural achievements of its era. But what happened inside it reveals a truth about human nature that transcends time and technology. Given authority over others, given permission by law and custom, given the protective cover of crowd participation, ordinary people will watch extraordinary cruelty without protest. will participate in systems of control and punishment that would horrify them if encountered individually, but seem acceptable, even necessary, when presented as social order. Helena's story, Marcus's execution, the Persian woman's sale into slavery. These aren't ancient history. They're templates, blueprints that every generation reproduces with contemporary materials. We've upgraded from bulls to solitary confinement, from mutilation to life sentences that achieve the same social death, from public executions to death rows, hidden from view but still serving the same theatrical purpose. The Hippodrome closed centuries ago, but its principles operate in every correctional facility, every immigration detention center, every space where society designates certain humans as deserving whatever happens when we stop looking. If you want to understand how systems of control persist across centuries, how the architecture of punishment adapts while the underlying mechanisms remain unchanged, subscribe to Prison Diaries, because the Hippodrome isn't history, it's a warning. And every prison built since then proves we haven't learned what it was trying to teach us.